Addison, and up here is Marty Beaudet. Marty, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for. Am I on? Okay. Thank you for having me. I don't hear myself.
It's a little light, yeah. But anyway, what a thrilling, stirring, remarkably made movie. Thank you so much for sharing it with the Klamath Independent Film Festival again. And yeah, I'm sure I love chatting with you this morning because you described yourself as a creative, which of course you are. And so I'm just curious, do you want to talk a little bit maybe about that journey from being a writer to becoming a filmmaker?
Yeah, I it took me 8 years to complete my first novel. I moved to Oregon from the Bay Area with my husband Chuck, and he graciously agreed to work full time while I pursued my dream of becoming a novelist. And after I got my first novel out, then a year later, I had this nightmare that I alluded to earlier that was so vivid that I just flew out of bed and had to write it down. I normally don't remember my dreams long enough to even describe them. And this one was so clear, it was like a memory rather than a dream. And all the pieces were there. I flew out of bed. I wrote for 15 days. I wrote and I published it as a novella with no rewrites other than editing for, typography. And that was it. It was like it was dictated to me. And so, um, and then I later, when I published my third novel, a year later, it was about the same week, I met a filmmaker who was showing us a pre-release screening of a film that he had just made that was very close to my heart because it was very personal about something that happened in my life, just coincidentally. And he and I bonded. And then he encouraged me to adapt my novels into screenplays, and I'd never written a screenplay before. But long story short, we did that. The first one we attempted to adapt didn't make it to the screen, but Alyssa, who was up there earlier, was a producer on it, and we didn't get that one made, but this one did get made, and so it's my first directorial debut.
Wow, and an excellent directorial debut at that. But well, that kind of segues into my next question about the community that you've found around the creative arts and around filmmaking, and particularly in Oregon. And it's so wonderful to be able to share it with friends and get to see your movie on screen. So, do you want to talk a little bit about kind of that community in filmmaking?
Yeah, since I came late to the game as a filmmaker, um, and I had also, I began attending film events and locally made films in Portland because of the filmmaker friend that I had made, and I got to know the community. And one thing I had noticed was that films that were collaborative usually turned out better than ones that were written, directed, edited, produced, starred in by all the same person. And if I can borrow a phrase from a director that I know who calls that cinematic masturbation. Um, just one person's fantasy and nobody else had no bearing on reality. And so I went into this process, especially as a novice, and I said, look, I want this to be collaborative. I want everybody's ideas. I want to hear them. We'll stop filming if you have an idea. Tell me. And I told Sherilyn Fenn the same thing when I picked her up in Eugene and we drove up to Portland together. So we had a couple hours to get to know each other. And I told her the same thing. I said, this is a collaborative process. I want to hear your input, your ideas. You have a lot of experience to contribute to this. And there was one part of her scene that she stopped and she asked me, she said, I want to say this because this is what I say to my own boys. And it just feels natural. I said, go for it. And she did. And it worked and we kept it. So it was very nice to have other people participating.
Absolutely, yes. And I forgot to mention, but if anyone from the audience has questions, we do have two mics set up. So please feel free to come up and ask a question and I'll see you and get to you. But talking about that collaboration, I mean, the casting in the film is just so spot on. I feel like everyone really nailed their role. What was kind of that process like of finding cast members and making the perfect kind of what you had in your dream, maybe that person matching that, or what was that like?
Yeah. you know, you can't always, and it's not necessarily the right way to do it to match exactly what you saw in your head. A lot of times, and I know this as an actor because I'm an actor myself, is that an actor will walk into an audition and show you something you never thought of before. So you have to be open to that. And so some of the characters were just like in my dream and my nightmare, but others I only saw it when they walked into the audition, and I said, oh, I love that. I want to keep that. And so, we kind of adapted that. All of the casting was done locally in Portland, except for Sherilyn, who came up from L.A. And we had a couple of actors who were originally based in Portland who were now living in Seattle, but it was all local otherwise.
Awesome. It looks like we have a question from the audience. So if you would like to go, yes, please. Oh,
It's on.
Oh,
Hello, hello. Oh, there you go. First off, congratulations. That was a beautiful film, and congratulations on your directional debut. My question was, there were a lot of beautiful locations. The cinematography was very beautiful. I was wondering if you would be able to talk a little bit on what it took to lock down the locations, and also from one filmmaker to another, how were you able to collect funding to be able to make that film? Independent films, as we all know, it's very difficult to get funding. And so just what was that process like? Was it tedious? And just what you believe helped you? And what were kind of the challenges for you?
to answer the last question first, it was excruciating.
Yeah.
We started with a Kickstarter that and nowadays, and even though this was 5 years ago that we started, even back then, crowdfunding was becoming a dead horse. But we didn't expect to make a lot of money from the crowdfunding, but it's a way of getting the word out, getting buzz started, getting people involved, and knowing that you're making a film. And so that was an important process. And that allowed us to at least go into pre-production. We raised enough there. We got, we, we hired a finder. Well, didn't hire, but it's like an agent. A finder, doesn't get paid unless they actually bring in money for you. And we got a finder down in LA. Just happened to be the half brother of one of the actors that we'd cast, and so that got us that connection. And so we used that process. I also had a personal friend of many, many years in San Francisco, and he and his partner were interested in. They had read my novels, and they were interested in what does it take to bring it to the screen. And I said money, and so they came on board as executive producers. But even so, all of that wasn't enough because we went over budget, as so many films do. Even in Hollywood, they go way over budget. And we were scrambling to try to finish the film. And my husband and I, threw in some more of our own funding, and we scraped together. We got some more for our other executive producers, and they threw in more. And so bits and pieces, we put that all together. As far as locations, so Adam Davis, who played Les, he is also a fellow actor, a friend of mine, who was living in our in-law apartment in the basement of our house at the time that I proposed to him that we make this film. And so we decided to split the duties. I was EP and director. He was producer and lead actor. So we kind of leapfrogged each other there. So the two of us together went out, and we didn't hire a location manager. We personally went out and found these locations because to me, we wanted Portland to be a character in the film, and we wanted to showcase it. And you'll notice a lot of the Portland bridges
Beautiful
are
shots.
showcased there, including the new Selwood Bridge after it was just opened. The picnic scene, which is one of my favorite scenes, cinematically. But we went to, these were all Portland locations, and we went in person and we talked to the owners, and we got turned down in a couple places because they had films made there before and they didn't like the way the place was left. So we had to give them our solemn word, that we'll respect your property, but we got it done.
Got it. Thank you.
great question. Thank you so much. And looks like we have one more from the audience. So please go ahead. Oh, Okay.
I wanted to ask you, with your cast that you had, in a lot of the sense, a little bigger than
Um, yeah, well, with Sherilyn, Sherilyn was not our first choice. Um, and here's a little Easter egg that'll probably end up on IMDb as a continuity error. You'll notice that the EMT describes her as 160 pounds, and Sherilyn is obviously not 160 pounds because that was a different actress who was originally in the role. But her manager would not let her do it because of conflicts with other things that was going on. She thought it was too tight. So we scheduled Sherilyn's scenes, the shoot around her visiting Comic Con in Eugene because she goes to Comic Cons and represents Twin Peaks. And one of our sound engineers, John Neff, was David Lynch's partner in Mulholland Drive, Inland Empire, all of that. And he knew Sherilyn as well. And he was also at the same Comic Con. So I made arrangements to drive down to Eugene and pick her up. And we had a 2 hour drive together to Portland to get to know each other. And then we put her up at the Nines. And when we got there, we had lunch together, just the two of us, the whole restaurant to ourselves at the Nines. What's it called? The Farmers Market or something like that. And it was just the two of us, which was kind of surreal. It's like this private restaurant just for the two of us. And she was really laid back and really easy. The first thing she said when she got into my car was, I really love that this is a personal story, but I need to know more about your mother because she was playing my mother in My Nightmare. So I started telling her stories about my mother, and my mother had dated Frank Sinatra, and had a really interesting life. And she had been locked up in the state hospital, and lots of stories. And so I'm sharing all of this with Sherilyn, and she turns around and starts sharing her stories with me. And she told me how, talking about dating celebrities or whatever, she told me how she met Prince, and how she and a girlfriend were in a bar, and he walked in, and he was ordering at the bar, and her girlfriend was checking him out, and her girlfriend was interested in him, and he turned and looked at them, and he made eyes at her instead of her girlfriend, and he asked them if they'd like a drink, and the rest was history. And so it was interesting, it's like personal stories you don't necessarily expect to hear from these people. And at lunch, at lunch, I asked her. I wanted to get away from all workshop talk, So I didn't want to ask. I didn't want to talk about acting or ask her fan questions or whatever. So I just said to her, just randomly, "What's the craziest thing that's ever happened to you? The most unexpected thing." And she says something. She started out, well, it was when I was 16 years old, and Johnny and I were working on a Coke commercial, and she meant Johnny Depp. And it's like, I don't even remember what the crazy thing was. I don't remember how the story finished. I'm just sitting there pinching myself, like I'm having lunch in this restaurant, just the two of us with Sherilyn Fenn. And she's just telling me this casual story about she and Johnny Depp, and she went on to talk about how much she still loves him, and blah 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 blah. So that was really fun. But it turns out that Sherilyn has an ethnic background similar to my mother's, and there were a lot of parallels. And yeah, so that was nice. Other cast members, there was nobody. I guess there were no other really super interesting stories from other cast members. They were all most of them were people I had known or had met before in Portland, and so I was pretty familiar with them.
That's great. Thank you so much for that question. We really appreciate it. Thank you. So one of the really unique life experiences about being a filmmaker is that you get to kind of see your vision, or in this case, your nightmare, actually go on screen and show it and share it with the world. So I'm just curious, what's it kind of like maybe for the blank umpteenth time of seeing this film and kind of that universal experience as a filmmaker of seeing it over and over and kind of what your feelings on it.
Well, prior to its release, I had come to hate the damn thing. I could not stand to look at it one more time, and yet I had to again and again and again, and in fine detail. And I was completely losing the story because I was focused on the details. And I will be the first to admit there are a lot of details in here. If you're, a continuity freak, have at it. Go to IMDb and post it all because it's all there. And I could sit here and tell you all the continuity errors. And so there were so many things I just came to hate about it because I didn't have the time, money, or wherewithal to fix everything and make it perfect. And so that really ate at me. But once it was handed off to the distributor and it was no longer up to me to do anything about it, and I couldn't do anything about it, and then I started to see it with audiences, I could watch it with a little more detachment and actually begin to enjoy it. And so I feel more fondly toward it now than I did during the creative process, and especially the producing process, because the producing is a nightmare. The business end of things, and I really, really gravitate more toward the creative process.
Well, we are so grateful for your hard work, and we loved it, whether throughout the whole process. So thank you so much again for sharing it with the film
Thank you.
festival. If we don't have any more questions, Marty, do you have any more final thoughts that you'd like to share about losing Addison, or any tidbits?
Not really. Again, I'll just acknowledge it's far from perfect, but it was a labor of love, and I would love it if if you want to go rate it on IMDb or Amazon Prime or iTunes or whatever, just to let people know you've seen it. And it doesn't even have to be a good review. It doesn't. I don't. No, really, really. In fact, if you get too many 5 stars, people start doubting you, and Amazon 10 stars, they start thinking you just got all your friends to rate it, and they don't believe it. So we need some less than perfect reviews.
Okay.
So please have at it.
Well, we have a poster for you for the Losing Addison premiere at the film festival, or our premiere of it.
Well, thank you.
So yes, please give another round of applause for Marty. We do have one more question. So Anna, please share your question.
Are you going to do it again?
I swore when this was over. In fact, I promised my husband, who endured all of this, and and helped sew up the funding, that I would not put him through it again. But that said, I definitely will. I will not produce again. I absolutely will not produce. I will not EP. I will not be responsible for the money. I am an actor and I am a writer, and I will continue to do both of those. And I am willing to direct, because it's all part of the creative process. But in Portland, it tends to be that people want to direct their own work. And so I don't expect to be hired as a director. That just doesn't happen very often in a town like Portland, but I'm certainly willing to. And of course, if somebody wants to fund something I write and let me direct it, great. But, I'm grounded in reality. And so I will write, and I will write on spec. And, this film gets me entry into the Writers Guild. And if that produces something, then I'll go there.
Awesome. And with that, a shout out to Chuck. Thanks so much for being here also, and to all the significant others of filmmakers, who wouldn't be able to do it without y'all and your support. Thank you, Chuck.
Yes, thank you.
And also, Marty, I would just like to shout out his jellyfish shirt, and he has the most wonderful socks on that are movie themed. So exactly. Give those a show. Woo! Okay, great. Well, we'll be breaking for lunch now, but we'll be back at 1:10 with our Modoc Nation film, and we're so excited about that, with a panel afterwards. So please be sure to come back for that. For lunch, there's a few great options around town. We have Leap of Taste, we have a Thai restaurant, we have Rodeo's Pizza, there's Lighthouse Yogurt. I'll probably go get some froyo, and then two Mexican restaurants. So a lot of great options. So, but yeah, back here at 1:10 for the Modoc Nation.
Oh, am I still on?
Yes.
Just one more thing. In the lobby, there are posters, postcards, souvenir postcards, and little Nerf footballs that say "Losing Addison" on them. Now that you all have seen it, you know what the football is. It's a totem for every time Addison was in control. The football is in the scene, and so Yeah, the little Nerf footballs are for you to take home, and there's plenty out there, so have at it.
Man, great symbolism. Okay, thank you. Thank you so much, Marty.